Good afternoon, and welcome to another live stream on the Angry Astronaut. First of all, can everyone hear me? My inevitable first question. Am I audible? If somebody could type in real quick. Great. Thrilled to hear it. Once again, thank you very much for showing up. And once again, we're at our more traditional time of 4:30, I believe it is, Greenwich Mean Time. But in any event, I do like to accommodate folks on the other side of the planet as often as I can. So I try to mix it up a bit. However, it doesn't change the fact that I'm always running around in a frenzy trying to get things ready right before we get things started. So thanks very much for showing up. So as I've been able to change the thumbnail, so you folks can probably guess as to the topic. And it was voted on by our Patreon supporters. And thank you very much for participating in this and choosing a topic that I think is going to be very interesting, maybe a little grim. Those of you who tend to get a little upset about doomsday scenarios, perhaps this isn't the episode for you. But nevertheless, I think that it's something that we should be talking about. I read an article in about Generation Z and how this is regarded by many people, including themselves, as the post apocalyptic generation, a generation that doesn't expect to see a world that's as good as their parents experienced. And a lot of folks my age tend to look down on folks, either millennials or Generation Z people, that sort of thing. My experience with these kids have been entirely different, I think, than most. Maybe just because I associate with different members of this generation, I don't know. But I find them to be a very hardworking and dedicated bunch of people. And it's not just restricted to my own kids. I've participated as a referee in swim events, coaching in baseball, all sorts of things. And I've seen a lot of dedication and a lot of kids who are very responsible, listen very well. And I'll tell you, I have a pretty high regard for Generation Z. And if indeed it is true that we of the of Generation X and those who came before us have given them a world that is a horrible thing to inherit. That's something that troubles me on a pretty regular basis. And this, I think, is one of the main reasons why Elon Musk is so determined to get us to another planet and get the human race into a lifeboat. It has nothing to do with the sun expanding and exterminating the human species. I really don't think so. He says things like that, or he mentions things about comets sometimes, but really, I think deep down, he thinks that there are far more present dangers to human civilization and indeed the human species that could happen tomorrow in some cases that threaten us on a regular basis, and it's just getting worse. There are more and more things as our technology advances that become huge existential threats to our civilization and to our species. And I think this is why it is extremely important that we become multiplanetary, and our civilization doesn't stand a chance of surviving without it. And I hate to say things like that, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope that civilization on Earth goes on for a very, very long time without some sort of cataclysm taking place. I don't want to see my children and my grandchildren inheriting something like that. But still, nevertheless, it seems that that's probably or it seems that that's something that could very well happen. And so, what we're going to talk about is what is the most likely cataclysm that could take place. that, compels us to become a multiplanetary civilization? What is the most likely thing that could take place? And I know what mine is, but nevertheless, I'd very much like to hear what everybody else has to say. So, in any event, apart from lifeboat, says Timothy, I think our species needs a motivation to be better. Interplanetary travel may be the key to a golden age. Yes, I think so. I think if the human species starts focusing on expanding out into the solar system and we become excited about that, that's something for us to be concentrated on rather than fighting over, limited resources that get more and more limited as time goes on. Framrick mentions the go west young person approach. The Polynesians did it. They did indeed. And we spread out to avoid cataclysms. Yes, we do. And we have many times in the past. And unfortunately, now with everything being globalized, the only way for us to spread out is to spread out to other worlds. Johnny says supervolcano is his most likely scenario. Yeah, there are many volcanoes on the face of the earth that could go off at any moment that have a tremendous destructive potential, far, far worse than our civilization, not necessarily our species. The Yellowstone supervolcano went off when our species did exist. However, we were nearly wiped out by it in any event at that time. But that's something that would create a true disaster, mostly because a supervolcano would block out the sun for many, many years, destroying the crops, destroying our food supplies, and making us desperate. It would, if it were the Yellowstone supervolcano, for example, it would wipe out the vast majority of the Western United States. It would destroy the United States as a superpower and render millions upon hundreds of millions of people actually in the United States homeless and desperate and nowhere to go except maybe Canada. And ironically, Mexico. And how enthusiastic are countries like this going to be to take us in? Because Canada is going to be seriously affected about this too. Any country around the world is going to be devastated by a super volcano in terms of how much it will affect their food production for many years. And countries that don't have food tend to become quite desperate. And when you have desperate nations that start fighting over diminishing resources, that creates a situation where conflict over those diminishing resources becomes likely. And when you have conflict between desperate nations equipped with nuclear weapons, that creates an even more serious situation, obviously, to where we might not just be facing a super volcano winter, but also a nuclear winter, which would almost certainly wipe us out as a species. Ryan, the space update, or Ryan OC, as he is sometimes called, a big contributor to this channel, says the biggest threat is the rising sea levels within the next 30 to 50 years. Yeah, this is a very, very highly charged topic, and there are tons of people that don't believe in global warming and climate change. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not 100% convinced, but I'm 99% convinced. Elon Musk calls global warming the second greatest existential threat to the human race, talking about hyper intelligent AI as the number one threat, but he regards global warming as the number two existential threat to the human species. Now, putting aside the politics and whether people think this is a hoax or whatever, and I know that this always generates a lot of controversy, and it's unfortunate, but in any event, if we were to put all that aside and let's just say it happens, let's say that we have a between 4 to 6 degrees Celsius increase in our temperature, which, according to quite a lot of climatologists, is entirely possible. What would this do to the planet? Well, there have been a lot of projections, and most of them talk about rendering the vast majority of the planet uninhabitable for the human species, with the exception of Canada and Russia and a few other places. Canada and Russia would actually become better places. Russia would have a lot more ice-free ports. There would be some benefits, but the problem is you would have billions upon billions of people who would have nowhere to go. And Canada, of course, would probably not have the military ability to stop hordes of refugees from swarming into their country, but the Russians certainly would. And once again, that's a nightmarish situation, which, by the way, that's the big reason that my daughter, who was valedictorian of her class and got a full scholarship, everything paid for, which is a big benefit to me. But in any event, because she got that's the reason that she's going into the field that she is because she feels that nuclear power is going to be our best and quickest solution to global warming. That if we switch over to nuclear energy, safe nuclear energy, as rapidly as possible, that is our best chance. And that's her main reason for going into this field. She wants to save the planet. I mean, wow. Quite a thing as a father to think of that. Framrick just posted a whole bunch of list of potential global catastrophes. And yeah, the again, another talk about the greenhouse thing, and this is always, everybody always gets so angry about this whole issue. It is so polarized. But the fact of the matter is Framrick just mentioned Venus. And Venus, to me, is the strongest example that we can look to of what happens when carbon dioxide gets out of control. Venus has a thick atmosphere almost entirely made of CO2. And it used to be like us. The climate used to be similar to Earth's, but runaway CO2 turned it into hell. And I mean, if that's not evidence that runaway CO2 changes a planet's climate, I don't know what is. Tom mentions Waterworld. That's actually, I love that movie just because of Dennis Hopper. God rest his soul. Dennis Hopper is one of my favorite actors of all time, especially when he's playing a villain. FHM Consulting, we might be beyond the tipping point for dramatic climate change. So I give us 50 years before Hunger Games on a global scale. Yeah, and sadly, both of my kids believe that that's strongly possible too. They believe that it's entirely possible that they're going to be living through hell. And as a father, that's as disturbing to me as anything that I can think of. If that indeed is where we're sitting right now, and if we are past the tipping point, the world that they're going to inherit, because of our own short-sightedness, is truly terrifying. And maybe that's why I've got that 1% that thinks that maybe it's not real. Maybe just because I'm blindly hoping that it isn't going to go the way we're thinking. But there's a whole lot of scientific evidence, which I'm not going to go into right now. We could have a debate that goes on all day about climate change. And I'm not going to get into that. I'm just not. Let's just say that it is one of the potential disasters that could lead to a really serious problem. Because again, as livable space goes away, as our resources vanish, as people are relocated, billions upon billions of people live on the coasts, billions and billions of people rely on the food that comes from these regions that may be turned into deserts. What happens when that food goes away? What happens when those areas that we live in go away? countries get desperate. And once again, we come back to the same thing. What do countries armed with nuclear weapons do when they get desperate? Kind of frightening. Other potential futures, Star Trek Utopia. Yes, a utopia would be nice, wouldn't it? The Expanse, solar system colonization. That's another one that I'm okay with, even though a lot of bad things happen in the Expanse. I'm still, I at least still feel that the human species goes on in spite of it. Blade Runner talking about eco collapse and AI threats, says Framrick. Yeah, very true. There are many potential futures, and so much of it is still in our hands. Australia would, Timothy says, Australia would be completely a desert. Yes, that is true. New Zealand might be the only area that is spared that. Now, there are regions of Antarctica that might become habitable that Australia might be able to migrate to. But all that's doing is delaying the inevitable. Do you think Framrick asked, do you think we have the maturity as a species to realize how we can prevent our own self-destruction? I'm really not sure. Being in the United States, there's a lot of difference here in terms of how we're facing a lot of these things. And the fact that people in America, many of them tend to deny the reality of many of these things. I don't know how that is with the rest of the world. The Russians also are contributing a lot towards global warming. There are huge fires raging on a regular basis in Siberia, which the Russians, by the way, which is affecting the people who live there. And look it up sometime. There's a journalist who's covering it, and he is he has been threatened with his life by the Russian authorities for continuing to report on it, because these fires are not only causing destruction and contributing again to greenhouse gases, but on top of that, it's also causing the permafrost in that area to have an increased production of methane, which is a greenhouse gas that's 20 times as potent as CO2. So in any event, and yeah, FHM Consulting brings out Russia wouldn't be so attractive if permafrost starts exploding methane bombs like it's already happening. Wow, it's like you're reading my mind there, FHM Consulting. So in any event, just because, and the only reason I'm doing this, I keep forgetting this guy's name, but I want to point one thing out. When we're talking about the maturity of our species in terms of avoiding our own destruction. And many of you people have probably heard me talk about this guy, but his name is Vasily Arkhipov, the Russian vice admiral, to whom the human race, nearly everybody owes their lives to this man. This man is hardly even talked about in the media or history or anything else. But during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Russian submarine was under attack. And of course, I'm not going to talk about the whole background of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but a Russian submarine was under attack by a U.S. task force that was trying to force it to the surface. They were using practice depth charges, but the submarine didn't know this. The submariners, it's hard to tell the difference between them. So they thought they were being depth charged. What the task force didn't know is that this submarine had a nuclear torpedo on board with a 20 kiloton warhead. And they had to make the decision as to whether or not they were going to retaliate with a nuclear weapon against a U.S. task force. And both the captain and the political commissar on board this submarine decided to launch the torpedo. If they had done so, they probably would have annihilated the task force, or at least caused incredible damage and triggered World War III way back in the early 1960s before I was born. And Vasily Arkhipov, vice admiral of the Soviet submarine fleet, who just happened to be on this one submarine by pure chance. He was the one guy who had the authority to override them because they were out of contact with Moscow and the Kremlin because of the depth that they were at. So they had to make this decision on their own. And Vasily Arkhipov overrode their decision. He let cool heads prevailed, and he did not launch that torpedo and start World War III, which would have happened if it had been any other submarine. It would have happened if he hadn't have been so cool-headed, because it's tough to overcome the word of a political commissar in Soviet Russia. Very few people had the authority to do that, but he did, and averted World War III. And anytime somebody talks about mutual assured destruction keeping us from going to war with each other, well, if just by pure chance he didn't happen to be on board, because mutual assured destruction didn't stop the other two guys, the captain and the political commissar, but he made the decision not to go. And that's how close we came to annihilating one another. So, as long as our civilization continues to have enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other, and in spite of the cutbacks that we've implemented, we still have more than enough to annihilate human civilization and start a nuclear winter. That remains a clear and present threat. And by the way, that's my choice, remains my choice for future cataclysms, is all of these things we're talking about: supervolcanoes, global warming, anything that makes countries desperate ends with a nuclear exchange. And by the way, Vladimir Putin has more power than any Russian leader since Stalin. He has no Politburo to report to, no central committee, none of that. This guy has absolute power and could trigger a nuclear war if he wanted to. It's a frightening scenario, and one that I hate to even think about, but never, and one that I try not to talk about when I'm talking about to my kids. Anyway, back here. Framrick says, which scenarios does involve moving on off planet help the most? More resources, less chance of direct meteoric impact, but still vulnerable to interstellar events like gamma ray bursts. Yes, a gamma ray burst would be very destructive. But once again, if we were on Mars and the planets were positioned right, a gamma ray burst might not hit Mars, whereas it might hit us. You kind of have to be lined up exactly right for a gamma ray burst. Timothy points out, my 16-year-old son feels concerned for the future, but shares my optimism that space holds solutions. Yes, my son is also 16 years old by interesting coincidence. And and in any event, yeah, it's kind of the same. He is frightened of a lot of things. And once again, this is why we call Generation Z the post-apocalyptic generation, a generation that really thinks that the end could be coming during their time. And it's bad stuff. By the way, since we have a lot of folks watching, thank you very much, you folks in the audience. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to contribute, you know how to do it. You can become a Patreon supporter for $3 a month. It's 75 cents a live stream. So in any event, getting in my little plug there while we have a fair number of people tuned in. If you want to contribute to this, become a Patreon subscriber, then a Discord member. It's very easy, and I have all of the instructions in the description of all of my live stream videos. And of course, it helps me out. And I do have ads on this particular one, by the way. Not the recorded one is going to have full out ads simply because of the fickle nature of YouTube, and I'm not going to talk anymore about that. Okay. Is spending a lot on space justified to help us avoid the eggs in one basket scenario? Vasily Arkhipov saved the world during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Top bloke, by the way, says Framrick. Yes, he was. This is a guy that should be remembered with reverence, because he literally saved the world. This isn't some make-believe guy like Captain Kirk or Picard or something like that. This is a guy who actually did save the world. And yes, it is justified. We need to spend a lot more on space. It can't just be Elon Musk. I mean, that is really putting all of our eggs into one basket as far as expanding off the planet. The Chinese do seem interested in colonization as well. They seem to be moving in that direction. A lot of people aren't fond of China, but it still would lead to the survival of the human species if they were to establish a colony someplace else. Excuse me, FHM Consulting. Putin has spent his whole life trying to bring down America and the West. Yes, he has. And I think there's a reason for that. I don't think, even though I'm not fond of the guy at all, I do think that there is a reason for it. This guy's a KGB person. This is a guy who thoroughly believed in the Soviet system. He was totally bought into it. All right. And the United States essentially brought them down by forcing the Soviet Union to spend a ton of money on their military. And this is well documented, by the way, that this was Reagan's plan to destroy the evil empire, was to make them spend so much on their nuclear arsenals and on their military that they would destroy their own economies and destroy their own country. It worked for the short term, but we've got Putin now who is very angry in the same way that Hitler and the German people were extremely angry about what happened to them in the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. And look what happened with that. So in any event, who knows what's going to happen with that situation. But yeah, Putin has been spending his whole life trying to do that. And you know what? Seeing it from his perspective, even though he is an awful guy, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Putin apologist, but from his point of view, he has some justifications as to why he wants to do that. So in it, and by the way, he isn't alone. There are a lot of cosmonauts who I've read a lot of their memoirs and such, who remember the Soviet system quite fondly and are very, very angry that their system was brought down and their country was destroyed, essentially. At least their vision for the future of Russia was brought down. As messed up as that might sound, that is how they feel. A lot of them do. So in any event, we may have a very short timeline to set up a civilization base, says Ryan, if anything happens in the next 50 years. Yeah, and that may be why Elon is moving so fast. That might be a big reason why he's so aggressive about all of this. We may not have a lot of time here. God, I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope we have more time than that. Because once again, I mean, my kids will live to see it. My grandchildren will definitely live to see it. Awful, just an awful thing. Let's hope that that's not the case. I don't know. Are we likely to become Framrick asks, are we likely to become architects of our own destruction with AI, nanotech, genetic modifications, molecular nanotech, or weaponry or super intelligent AI are estimated at a 5% chance of human extinction threats before 2100? Yeah, we're working on all that stuff. We humans love to play around with incredibly advanced technology and use it to kill each other. We seem to have a huge propensity to do that. And I do agree with I'm not sure if I agree that it's the biggest threat, but I think that hyper intelligent AI is a massive threat, because the temptation to weaponize hyper intelligent AI is just too strong, because so much of our military relies on computers. If you can find a weaponized hyper intelligent AI and then use it to wipe out your enemy, um, that's a huge temptation. It's a massive temptation. And if we don't do it, the Chinese will, or the Russians will. And the moment they do, does it get out of control? I think it probably does. So yeah, that's some scary stuff. And one that once again, if you're not thrilled with doomsday scenarios, probably best not to be watching this particular episode. Putin, Timothy points out, Putin plus China could be a new axis. Yes, that is possible. The Chinese and the Russians seem to be putting aside some of their long-held differences. For the longest time, the United States thought that they could use China against the Soviet Union. We opened up China, as Nixon did, and tried to strengthen our relationships with the Chinese with the goal of working against the Soviet Union. Once again, really short-sighted, because once again, they bit the hand that fed them, and it could get worse. So yeah, scary stuff. And scary stuff for everybody, by the way. Scary stuff for the Chinese. I would say the average Chinese person probably doesn't want to die in a Holocaust. So, this is scary for everybody, not just us. Okay, so Wormhole Alien says we may have a says that's why he's pushing so hard for a sustainable future. Yeah, pretty much what I said. But thank you, Wormhole Alien, for participating. Framick says technological singularity. Reach a point where AI invents better AI, which invents better AI. Yeah, that's when the human species becomes obsolete. That may be why, and I think it probably is, why Elon Musk is working towards linking the human mind with highly advanced computer technology, hooking it into AI so that we can add our sense of morality, our sense of self-preservation, value for the human species. We can add these things to we can add these things to an AI. That would be a great thing if we could do it. And some of you who have watched some of my older episodes, you may have seen the episode where I talked about a fictional alien species called We Who Became One, a biological species that linked together with their artificial intelligence and became a very successful hyper-intelligent species themselves. But in any event, I called them We Who Became One because they linked together with the AI, which was called One, and became a very powerful civilization as a result. That's the positive aspect of AI, if we can go that route. FHM Consulting says the U.S. is the Jon Snow of geopolitics. Quite possibly, quite possibly. I am. As I think a lot of you guys have noticed, I'm pretty open about criticizing my own country. Not that I'm not proud to be an American. There was a time not that long ago that I was really proud to be an American. Not as much these days, sadly. I'm not trying to make any political statements or anything. I'm just not as proud as I used to be. Okay, so Framrick says, if Neuralink succeeds and we can download human minds, do we become immortal? Do we worry about threats from the physical universe? Just transmit us through the galaxy or send servers out into the universe? Yes, it has been talked about, Framrick, that, this perhaps is the ultimate result of evolution and the development of civilization, is that we do become a technological civilization, that we stop, we abandon the biological. And every civilization perhaps does this. If they survive the great filter of nuclear war or whatever else that might destroy themselves, maybe all civilizations do this, because After all, AI survives a hell of a lot better in outer space than we do. So yeah, that may be the way things go in the future. Solar storms could destroy that possibility, says Ryan. Yeah, it depends on how powerful the solar storm, because there are ways of hardening computer technology against solar storms. But still, yeah, solar storms definitely represent a threat to all technology. And also, by the way, a super solar storm is another cataclysm that could not necessarily annihilate the human race, but definitely bring down a huge part of our civilization. Bear with me. Once again, advertising for Coca-Cola. That's vanilla Coke, by the way. I know that in Europe things are very different. And by the way, for you British viewers, I love Tango. That's something we don't have over there. So when I'm over in Britain, I always drink Tango instead of Coke. And we don't have that over here, but it's a really great soda. I'm a big fan. So anyway, enough of that. So create a galactic internet, backups in every solar system. Yeah, that's a hell of a way to do it. Definitely a way to do it. And by the way, again, in that episode that I made, We Who Became One, that's how they end up surviving over the long run as well, is by backing themselves up in one solar system after another. Starlink 2.0, as Ryan says. Yes. Carlinized Mars says, just sitting here nodding away repeatedly. Every time I go to write something, it's already being asked. Anyway, I sit back and enjoy a stream. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Once again, maybe I'm just talking too much. Sorry about that. I do tend to just kind of run off at the mouth and express my own opinions a bit much. And this is more about you guys expressing your opinions too. So in any event, I'll try to keep that in mind a bit more. Talk a little bit more about the coffee cup, by the way. Oh, I love the coffee. I hate the cup. Um, oh yeah, one thing I did want to mention is the whole concept of the sun expanding to destroy the earth, and that's why we need to leave. That's billions of years in the future. Even if Boeing or a tribe of monkeys was put in charge of our space program, we could colonize the solar system before that happens. And by the way, to any monkeys watching, I'm sorry that I just insulted you. But in any event, I'm going to destroy this coffee cup if we can get to 40,000 subscribers. So please subscribe, because I'm going to blow this thing up and I'm going to film it, and it is going to be very entertaining. I promise you. Okay. Just for the taste of it. End of the world Coke, says Frederick. If we can survive our extinction agenda, why can't other species? Why aren't they reshaping the universe so we can see them? The Fermi paradox. Well, Framrick, we're getting a little off topic on that one. I actually believe that there is no Fermi paradox. I think that there are many things that we have observed in the universe that strongly indicate the presence of extraterrestrial civilizations. For one thing, over 100 stars have simply vanished since the 1980s. And this has been well documented. A story was only just released about this. Totally vanished. Why? And there haven't been a whole lot of convincing natural explanations. Usually they blow up, or there's some kind of, some kind of black hole in their place, or nebula. They just go away. Now, to me, the most compelling explanation is that extraterrestrial civilizations are building Dyson swarms, and that's why they dim and vanish when we weren't looking. And by the way, these stars have vanished in the space of 3 decades, not a lot of time. So there's actually, in my opinion, and that's just one of a lot by the way, of compelling evidence that we've observed in modern day astronomy that indicates the presence of extraterrestrial civilizations. I do believe that they are out there. We're just not looking hard enough, and we're not looking in the right ways. By the way, by the time we put up some better telescopes that can look closer and look more effectively, I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more compelling evidence for the existence of these species. And it's going to be more and more difficult to deny it. And by the way, I'm not an advocate of UFOs. I don't believe in alien abductions. I'm not one of those people. But I do believe that we have seen more than enough astronomical phenomena that we can't explain, that all of it can't be explained away with natural explanations. Maybe some of it, but not all of it. So I do believe that, but that's a topic for another episode. So in any event, I do think that there's some reason to be optimistic. I think that there is evidence of other species in other star systems. Okay. So yeah, rest in peace, Boeing, says Cully. That was a burn and a half. Yes. Ramrick, if we move into space, do we stop likely extinction events or do we carry on? China launches rocks from space. Yeah, we could very well carry on if we move into space. However, the Chinese launching rocks at us from the moon is less likely if we get to the moon. And by we, I say the rest of the world, the ESA, NASA, everybody else gets to the moon first and can keep Chinese activities under observation. And once again, I am not saying that China is definitely going to do this. All right, that's definitely going to use weapons of mass destruction from space. I'm just saying that they could if they wanted to. Okay, so let's see. Ryan says there is a high risks of asteroids and radiation on the moon and Mars. Although it's possible to travel there, it will be a great challenge. It is. It will be a great challenge to survive. There's no question about that. But we humans are very adaptable, and we're very intelligent and have accomplished great things in our history. So I do strongly believe that ultimately we will be able to survive in all of these places, given the opportunity. FHM Consulting says it's our propensity for self-destruction and error correction algorithm. If we can we rewrite the code so that maybe hold on, sorry. Can we rewrite the code maybe so we get to the next level and survive? Well, I like to think optimistically sometimes. I think that if we do go back to the moon, go to Mars, that sort of thing, that's definitely going to give us a shot. There's no question about that. Yes, what happened to the vanish Jet Morgan? Hey, Jet Morgan, hello. You don't commonly contribute to these. Thank you so much for showing up. What happened to the vanishing stars? The Boeing black hole, they do suck. Yes, indeed they do. That sounds like a really good explanation. Another space nut has shown up. Thank you very much for showing up. No problem for being late. So yes, fashionably late, as Ryan says. So are we? Framrick says, are we more likely to go extinct from neglect, biodiversity loss, climate change, etc., than deliberate means such as nuclear war? That's a tough one. In my opinion, I think nuclear war. I think that's the most likely. Not necessarily because we push the button tomorrow, but because we have some other cataclysm happens that makes nations that have nuclear weapons at their disposal desperate. And when they become desperate, that's when they push the button. So in any event, oof, we got a lot of people watching now. Thank you so much for tuning in, audience. Really do appreciate, and those who are contributing, thank you once again. You know how to be part of this. It's in the description. You help support this. Unfortunately, I'm having to do monetization on this particular video. Sorry about that. But in any event, I do my best to avoid ads on these things if I can. But you know how to, it's all in the description on how to contribute. And please like and subscribe, so that I can blast this coffee cup. All right, so let's keep going. Are we likely to die before we get to Mars? The planet is at a turning point and it is a race against the clock. It is indeed. Are we likely? If we keep moving at Elon speed, no. I think that Elon can make it happen. And if he gets some help, that would be a nice thing if he were to get some assistance. But yeah, it is a race against the clock. God, I hate to say that. We have the perfect planet to live on. We really do. And we're trying so damn hard to make it uninhabitable. It's just sad. So in any event, oh, and don't forget to hit the like, by the way, says Framrick. So yes, thank you. Thanks, guys. Tom says, pretty sure the human race will go extinct due to our own destruction and not natural causes. I do agree, Tom. I think that we are more likely to be victims of our own stupidity than some natural disaster. And Timothy says, I hope you're wrong. Yeah, I hope I'm wrong too, by the way. I really do. We're intelligent enough to survive as a species. We're intelligent enough to save ourselves. Why the hell can't we? Put aside our petty differences. Stop arguing with science and start doing something radical things to save the planet, that this perfect planet that we have, that we live on. But at the same time, start taking aggressive action to survive in case things do turn for the worst, as it seems that it may very well happen. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. Do we need genetic backups off planet? The seed catalog, DNA specimens on the moon or Mars? Well, Framrick, I would say arguments could be made that maybe we need DNA backups going to other star systems too. Maybe we need to be doing a lot to preserve the human species. And so, in many ways, that's why some of these more advanced telescopes are important. If we can find a planet that's habitable, a planet where we could start again, and send a gene bank to, that sort of thing, a generation ship, whatever, that could be our salvation. So there's another possible thing. We are not trying, I'm afraid. Mr. Angry says another space note. We did it already. It's a bomb and the fuse is in the case. Yeah, another space note. That very well could be. That very well could be. And by the way, that makes me as angry as hell, to even think that that's what ended up happening. Because I have two kids that I love very much, who are both brilliant, far smarter than me, way smarter than me. And they're going to face a future that my generation, the generations before me, created. It gets me pissed as hell. But in any event, Timothy, to get on a more positive note, the James Webb Telescope will be a game changer. Yes, and I promise I'm going to do an episode about that sometime soon. It doesn't deal as much with solar system related colonization and that sort of thing, which is what I talk about a lot. But the James Webb Telescope, it's way too important to just bypass. So I will have a video about that. Framrick says, should we spend money to launch seeder ships across the galaxy, basically our own panspermia? Send a message, we were here, by sending slow interstellar probes with DNA packages. Sounds like a good idea. We already have sent the message, we were here, on the Voyager spacecraft at the insistence of Carl Sagan. Quite a visionary, that man. So in any event, I'm very glad that he did manage to win that argument, because in the end, Voyager 1 and 2 will travel about the galaxy for tens of thousands, if not millions of years. And there he is, by the way. There's good old Carl, who I used to watch when I actually saw Cosmos, the very, very first episode that came out on PBS way back in the day. I was there as a kid to watch that very first episode. So yeah, he's definitely one of my idols. So yeah, expanding that to a transpermia kind of probe, something to the we were here kind of thing. Why not? I think that would be a good idea, in as our last gasp for our species. Perhaps that might be a good idea, and it wouldn't cost that much, by the way, to do it. So why not? Another space nut says, we cannot even look past colored skin, let alone not try and kill each other. People are the issue, and I just hope we don't. And I'm going to avoid that just because we don't F up Mars too, because I'm actually monetizing this video. So, and I have no idea if that upsets YouTube or not, but in any event, who knows? But Johnny Spacer says we could store DNA code in a computer and use 3D printing to make the DNA when needed. Very interesting idea. Never really thought of that. Well, actually, didn't Red Dwarf come up with that idea? I seem to remember seeing that one time. That was kind of funny. So in any event, that would be another interesting possibility. And thank you, Framrick, what you just said. And love all you guys as well, by the way. Do you think that we will carry on developing technology and getting more advanced, or is there a risk of regression back to a non-tech age? We run out of resources, etc. I'm going to get a little bit Pollyanna about this, but I do believe that if Elon Musk were not doing what he was doing now, I might feel differently about this. But I think that we will continue to carry on developing technology. Maybe it'll be on Mars instead of here, but I think that we will. Those who go to Mars are going to be the best and brightest of all of us. And if we do destroy ourselves back on Earth, they will learn. They will see what happened. They will see the short-sightedness of our own stupidity. There will be legends of our stupidity that will go on for millennia, perhaps to the point to where we can recolonize Earth. And I think technology will continue to exist if we can get onto another planet, regardless of what we happen to do here. Seed catalog, seeder ships, are we more than just our DNA? How are we simply propagating our DNA means we're saving humanity? Whether it be AI computers teaching our culture to the beings born out of our DNA, yes, I think that we would already have to have information about ourselves as well. Should aliens be nice enough to want to do that for us if they stumbled across us? As opposed to saying, geez, this was a dangerously violent species. Let's get rid of them rather than resurrect them. Who knows? Elon, another space nut says Elon is already working on an RNA printer. Very interesting. This guy has his fingers into everything. he is Mr. Sci-Fi. He wants to bring science fiction into the present day. It's some cool stuff. Very, very cool indeed. FHM Consulting. The problem is that science is the future, but it has a lot of enemies in politics and business. Funding for Mars will probably need to be private to steer clear of the future eaters. I would tend to agree. I hope that NASA at least does some, that the ESA contributes some to this, because I think there's a lot of people in those organizations that see things the way Elon does. But yeah, mostly I think it's going to take very rich people with a vision. Okay. Tesla, oh, and a link was just put up. Tesla to make molecule printers for COVID-19 vaccine developer CureVac. Wow, that is very cool. So that we can manufacture COVID-19 vaccines more quickly. What an amazing technology that would be. Thank you, Mr. Musk. Maybe you could help do something about COVID as well. As much as people slam on you for not closing down your factories and all that when other people were and that sort of thing, you also seem to be trying to do something to stop this thing, and I'm pretty happy about that. Lilu in the Fifth Element, 3D printing, Mila Jovich. Yes, that actually did happen in the Fifth Element. However, it did actually happen in Red Dwarf as well. I saw an episode of that, a recent one when they rebooted Red Dwarf. So in any event, Avinash, hello. I've not seen you for a while. And there are psychological mechanisms like attachment. Without caregivers, how would these beings grow to be humans whom inhabit the earth today? They would need caregivers. They would need something, whether it be an alien species that would be kind enough to do so. AIs, there's actually a movie about that too, and I forget the name of it, where an AI starts raising intelligent humans in order to propagate the human species again. And I'm not going to give away any more of the movie, by the way, because there's some twists to it. Gunkeltron, hello. Been a little while. Although extinction events are certainly a concern, I think maybe smaller events that cause the collapse of our global civilization are the biggest concern. There are so many natural resources that we've already depleted to the point to where what remains can't really be extracted without the infrastructure of our civilization. We've seen plenty of individual countries undergo major collapse, and it doesn't take much before people are starving in the crumbling ruins of their own country, unable to rebuild. If that were to happen on a global scale, I fear we would be trapped on Earth permanently until we finally do go extinct. The threat of that grows every year until we have self-sustaining colonies in space. I don't think I could have put that better. That was fantastic. Grim, but we knew this was going to be a grim episode. That was really well put. And a big reason why we should be asteroid mining. So many of these extremely important raw materials that we desperately need are out in the asteroid belt just waiting for us. And yeah, it takes a lot of money on the front end, but who cares? Okay. The best and brightest in one space nut, another space nut. That was very funny. Okay. Framrick points out you would need to see in cedar ships with a combination of biogeneration to create the human and educational systems to educate the human. You're overlooking the point. He is printing biomolecules. Boy. Really interesting stuff. Okay, Jet, hello again. Personally, I don't think we have so much of an Earth resource issue per se, but more of a conflict over control, resources, and population. I think Elon understands this, hence drive to escape the possible apocalyptic fallout. Yes, once again, well put. Yeah, that's so many things, so many compelling reasons why we need to get the hell off this planet, and do something about it. Do something about preserving our species. Avinash, in response to Fermi, that would solve one problem, but would these beings, uh, form attachments to the educational systems instead of a mother and father? Folks born today who don't have caregivers to form attachments to, per Melanie Klein's object relations theories, don't develop the same way. That's true. Parents are pretty important. Parents are pretty critical. I haven't got the software to cope with this. That's great. Very good indeed. Okay. Okay. We're getting lots of good links, by the way, on Discord. So once again, the way to join Discord, and boy, I'm starting to fall behind here. Timothy says, if we don't clean up space junk within a couple of decades, we will be stuck here. Yeah, that's another serious threat. But we do seem to have some plans to do that. And I think, yes, Johnny Spacer, the movie is Mother. Thank you for bringing it up. Really interesting twists in that movie, and I strongly recommend it. Okay. Let's see. Stuff in dot space to see how bad the issue is. Interesting. So yeah, I'd be interested to see that as well. And so yeah, a link has just been put on that. Stuffin, STUFFIN dot space. So, and all this stuff once again is on Discord, and it's only $3 a month to become part of Discord. Once again, I'm self-plugging here. But still, there's a lot of benefits. Yes, Avinash says, yes, I strongly recommend that you do watch that. Okay. Johnny Spacer set up an international bounty system to encourage the cleanup of space junk. Hell yeah. There's already some really good designs out there to capture space junk. Let's put some money behind that, because the designs already exist. The queen bee and the honey bees, which are designed for asteroids, can also be used to clean up space junk. If we don't make the jump now, we could be trapped here. But okay, great minds think alike, says Timothy. Another space nut says, Mr. Angry, what would be the chance of you joining myself and Ryan for our pilot podcast after you stream today as our first guest? I have to admit, I'm honored. I'm gonna have to give that some thought. I am so exhausted, and the reason is I stayed up until 4 in the morning, not last night, but the night before, and it threw me off as I was desperately trying to get a video completed. I would love to. Do you think maybe we could look as the second guest if I could have a little advance notice? I would definitely like to. But I would love to be I would love to be in your next podcast if you don't mind. And it's only just because I am running on pure caffeine right now. So I do apologize. But in any event, let's press on. Okay, Super Jelly. Hello. I don't know if I've ever seen you before. If not, welcome. I'm optimistic. Need to keep that. I'm optimistic and tend to think that having more small space colonies will give us more resilient food production capability. But I think that there will be serious limits to access to this technology. You think there are ways to force space tech to trickle back down the gravity well? To force it? I don't know. But I think once it happens, there's going to be a lot of interest in it. There's going to be a lot of other people that are going to want to take advantage of it. I would say the strongest way, again, would be asteroid mining. Somebody becomes crazy rich doing this, exploiting an asteroid that has, raw materials that we desperately need, and then everybody jumps on the bandwagon. I think it's just going to take that first person to take that first risk And that could cause the trickle down really fast. It's all about money, isn't it? But that's the way our civilization is. Framrick asks, do you think colonizing low Earth orbit with factories and solar power satellites will help us survive for longer? Framrick, honestly, I don't think we have the time. This is the Blue Origin goal. And honestly, I don't think it will. And here's why: it's too vulnerable. Orbiting colonies are too easy to wipe out, too easy to hit with nuclear weapons. And that's something that it's just too vulnerable and very, very difficult, by the way, these huge orbiting facilities. I like the idea, but I just don't see enough people who are trying hard enough yet. Oh, yes, Avinash just asked for a link to the podcast channel. So in any event, I would be very interested in that myself. So I will, as soon as it comes up, I'm going to go ahead and put it into the description of this video. Assuming I stay awake long enough, I'll pop it into the description of this video so folks can take advantage of the podcast. Okay, Framrick, yeah, does recovery of near Earth objects help our chances of survival? Well, yeah, maybe that might, because if somebody gets super rich doing it, then then there might be an exodus of getting off planet. Elon Musk might find himself with tons of competitors. Okay, so we don't have okay, we don't have a link yet, but we will. Oh, Cbot. Hello, Cbot. I'm not sure how new you are or if you're brand new, but if you are brand new, welcome. Sorry if this is off topic, but the problem is getting out of Earth's gravity well into orbital velocity. Could we not use the Starship to build an orbital ring in low Earth orbit? Once it's operational, to get massive amounts of mass to orbit, and then use nuclear propulsion to get where we need to go. Well, that's a huge project. Space elevators to me, but then again, space elevators are dangerous. They on Earth because of all the problems associated with it. But maybe not an orbital ring, but orbital stations of some kind. Because once you escape the gravity, it doesn't take much. And nuclear thermal propulsion doesn't involve a whole lot of thrust at all. It just involves a long burn. And I just released a video about that, and a lot of you folks may have seen it. You don't need a lot of thrust once you escape that initial into low Earth orbit in order to start traveling around the solar system. So yeah, once we get there, it's not a bad idea. I would say orbital stations and refueling stations more than a ring. And solar power satellites would be best at geostationary orbit. Yes, that also is true, so that we would have constant power. Although it would be tough in order to be able to do that. Anything in Earth orbit rather than being beyond the moon. Okay. Cbot says he's new from this Saturday. Well, once again, welcome and thank you for joining us. And once again, the way to join is right in the description. It's easy. It's pretty cheap. And I do it every Sunday, no matter how lousy I'm feeling, usually. So, in any event, I think that, as a matter of fact, I'm probably going to go back to sleep once I'm completed with this. I threw myself off, I have to admit, a couple of nights ago, getting a video done. So, let's see. Okay, so best estimate. Will we survive another century beyond 2120? That's a tough one. As a species, yes, because I think Elon Musk will get us enough of us to Mars to survive. Here on Earth, 50-50. I'd say there's as good of a chance of us wiping ourselves out as there is of surviving. And I might be a little optimistic by saying that. But I do think that this latest generation, I'm not the only one who thinks this latest generation, this Gen Z that everybody likes to slam on, they're the ones who see the danger. They're the ones who realize what's coming up. They're the ones who are being taught in school just how bad things can get, and they're the ones who are going to do something about it. So maybe they might be the salvation of the species and turn things around. Of course, we always say that about the next generation, but you know something, there's something about these Gen Z kids, I don't know, that leads me to believe that we might have a paradigm shift. FHM Consulting, the problem with mining asteroids, even if you have a huge supply, it still has to be processed and delivered to manufacturing. There's no cost advantage. It will never happen on Earth. It only makes economic sense if the resource stays in space. Now, I'm not sure, FHM. It depends on the Starship, because the Starship, if it can really lift off for $2 million a go to low Earth orbit, and the resources are worth a lot more than $2 million once they've been processed. And there are robots that have been designed to process ore into pretty pure stuff. And we're talking about platinum and other rare forms of minerals, that it would be worth a lot more than $2 million for 100 tons of it. So it depends on how much it costs the Starship to transport stuff from low Earth orbit down to Earth. So I don't know. I'm not certain about that. But once again, what do I know? I can hardly claim to be an expert. Oh, and another space nut just offered, if just offered that if anybody needs help with anything related to the brand, to message him, and that is very true. Another space nut is one of my most reliable and consistent supporters, who really made some huge changes to make this channel what it is today. And I'm always going to be very indebted. So thank you very much. Sobering Sunday, says Framrick. Good to think through the problems rather than the ostrich syndrome. Yes. Let's not bury our heads in the sand and hope things get better, because we're definitely doomed if something like that happens. Do I have a bug out bag? This is OS 41. You might be brand new as well. Do you feel that each person should prepare themselves for worst case scenario situations? No, I don't have a bug out bag, and here's why. My children don't live with me. My daughter isn't even in the same city. If I do survive and my kids don't, I don't want to go. I don't want to go on. Simple as that. Others might have a stronger survival instinct, but I've had my share of dreams about it, not very many, but dreams about my kids dying. And I know my first instinct in those dreams is, what's the easiest way for me to take myself out? I hate to say things like that. And for those of you who have lost children, I am so sorry. And I don't know how you deal with the pain, because if I feel that way in dreams, I don't know how you tolerate it. You're stronger people than I am. I'll say that. So in any event, no, I don't have a bug out bag, just to let you know, because I don't have the confidence that I could protect my kids from something like that. So in any event, that's the answer to that question. It's kind of a grim answer, but nonetheless. So another space, we F the planet up and blame the current global crisis on Gen Z. Yes, that's a problem. Johnny Spacer says, my son is Gen Z, is kicking butt with his grades in college. Glad to hear it, Johnny Spacer. His major is computer engineering. Great. Starts a great co-op intern job on Monday. Fantastic. My proud cup floweth over. Fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. I'm very glad to hear it. And yes, I've seen a lot of that. My daughter's boyfriend is another one of these Gen Z kids that blows my mind with their intelligence. and their wisdom beyond their age. So fantastic. And that's why. No problem, another space nut. So you know why I'm answering that. So Timothy, as far as kids go, they justify my existence in my own mind. Absolutely right. They justify my own existence too. So yeah, that's why my own survival, it's just not important if I can't have them survive with me. So yeah, that being the case, I guess I'm one of those not so good survivors. One of those people who couldn't make it in the long run. But that's okay, because my kids have brought me so much joy and pride in my life that it's all right. If I can deal with that. So in any event, if the world ends before I'm on Mars, I wouldn't want to survive. Fights for survival in post disaster, says another space nut. Yeah, that would not be any kind of fun. That would not be any kind of fun at all. And another reason, again, why we need to become a multi-planetary civilization, why this is so damned important. On the subject of parenting, my Mars plan means leaving my son Tenish on Earth until Mars is ready for him to join me. Yes, well, it depends on how long it takes us to get to Mars. I mean, if we're looking at 2028, which is a date that I mentioned in another live stream, he'll be 18. So he will be ready. So yeah, and I think we'll make it that long. I hope we will. So yeah, we need to get enough people for there to be genetic diversity on Mars to have him going. And yeah, we wouldn't risk him coming in the first wave. Who is going to be in the first wave? I mean, we're going to need talented people. And dear God, do we want to sacrifice the best and the brightest? That's a scary thought. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, why I keep coming up with all of these videos about less risky ways of landing on Mars. Because I think that if we can set up an infrastructure there for transferring people more safely to the red planet, I think our chances are going to be a lot better of the first wave making it instead of being sacrificial lambs. Okay, let me do something for my voice here again. Okay. And my chance of going is increasing every day. If Elon needs cannon fodder, sign me up. If I die knowing my son would get to Mars for my efforts, sign me up. Well, you're a brave person, another space nut, and we're going to need people like you. We're going to need people who are going to take that chance in that first wave. That's going to be super important. Avinash, a little off topic, but do you think there will be an age limit for the first wave of settlers on Mars, considering the risk of space flight and life on Mars? I don't know. Considering that older people actually are going to manage better because the radiation, dangers are going to be less severe for older people because they're not going to last long enough for radiation to start manifesting itself. It's hard to say how that's going to happen. FHM going on to Scrubtober. So far, the first mission needs to be full of GCS experts. Yeah, Scrubtober does seem to be the case, doesn't it? Everybody seems to be scrubbing launches. Though a lot of that is weather related. October is a bad time in Florida. A whole lot of bad weather causing lots of scrubs. So in any event, hard to say. And that's another thing, by the way, the whole refueling bit in orbit. That's another thing that I have an issue with. All these scrubs. I mean, how in the world are we going to refuel the Starship 6 times reliably with as many times as we have to scrub right now? Is the Starship somehow magically not going to scrub? I don't know. That bothers me a little bit. And another reason why I support fuel depots in space to refuel as opposed to tankers. But that's more of a me thing. Okay. The low gravity on Mars would be easier on the old knees. Yes, me too, Johnny. Me too. Low gravity on Mars would go. Frederick asks, am I optimistic or pessimistic about humanity surviving and colonizing the galaxy and beyond? And once again, I am going to say kind of the same of what I said before. Because of Elon, I'm saying I'm more optimistic about our survival because there's a guy who's getting richer every day, who's determined to get us to Mars and is getting more and more capability and getting closer and closer with every launch of every prototype of getting us to Mars. I become more optimistic every time he tries, every time he launches. Now we got the Super Heavy getting ready. So I am actually more optimistic. If Elon wasn't around and we were still counting on NASA to get us to Mars, I'd say we'd be screwed. So yeah. And I hope to heck it isn't just more than Elon. It needs to be other people. It needs to be consolidation. We need to have something else going on. Yes, Johnny, I agree with you. My concern is we're putting all our space hopes and dreams on one person. Yeah, we are. It sucks. There needs to be somebody else. And you know who I'm talking about here, who this could be. Mr. Blue Origin himself. This could be him. He could be another Elon Musk, and he has so much more money than Elon does. He could be doing so much to perpetuate the species. And it looks like he is spending more money on Blue Origin than he currently is. That it's more than $1 billion a year. Looks like a little more like 2 billion, maybe 3. But it's more about space stations, stuff in low Earth orbit, stuff that could easily be shot down. Come on, dude. Let's have some competition on getting to Mars. I really think that, or Venus or whatever, someplace where we could establish a self-sustaining colony outside the range of nuclear weapons. Let's see. Alien Zookeeper says, I am for one in terms of being an optimistic. I just don't know if the civilization will do it or the one that scrambles back up afterwards. Okay, so you're a pessimist. Humans are tough and will survive this technical civilization. Yeah, we may survive. It may take thousands of years, tens of thousands before we crawl back out of the muck. And there's a whole lot of very grim books about that. Let's hope that isn't the case. Of course, the Hunger Games is one of them, where human civilization is destroyed. That what we have right now is just a distant memory, and we are barely scrambling back up into the light, and a very, very awful civilization coming up in its place. Let's hope that that's not what the future is going to be. Let's hope so. First Super Heavy and Starship orbital mission and translunar trip will convince people that we can do it, says Framrick. Yes, I agree. No matter who does it, by the way, I think that we can convince people we can do it. And by the way, I just talked to an SLS fan yesterday, and I told him something, and I'm going to make it public right now. He's on Twitter. He follows me. He's an SLS orange rocket loving guy. And I told him, I sent him a DM, and I said, I respect you for having the guts to support the SLS in spite of the fact that so many people, including myself, hate it. And if the SLS gets mankind to the surface of the moon, before the Starship does, I will make a public apology. And I'm putting that out there right now. I will. Simple as that. Not necessarily because the SLS is the future, but if it gets us back to the moon and gets the human race excited about going back to space, then I'll be more than happy to do it. So in any event, there you go. As much as I hate the SLS, I will do it if they manage to pull it off. And by the way, 2021, they're supposed to be orbiting the moon. So sorry, I can't help but start laughing when I hear that. But they're supposed to be orbiting the moon in 2021. We'll see. Okay, so Alien Zookeeper says, okay, I'm sorry, I just talked to yours. Framrick says, sorry, I'm starting to go backwards. Timothy says, competition drives innovation after all. Yes, indeed. Jeff, who also wants Elysium. Yes, he does, doesn't he? That does seem to be what he wants. All of the conceptual art about his ideas bears a hell of a lot of resemblance to that. An orbiting space station for the mega rich while the planet goes to hell. God, I sound paranoid by talking that way. But dear Lord, I mean, I hate to even say it, but it's true. It looks like that's what he's trying to do. And God, that's not what we need. That's really not what we need. Okay. Johnny Spacer says Blue Origin is deliberately being tied into the military industrial complex system. That is true. Jeff is teaming up with the big names in the business, isn't he, when it comes to the military industrial complex? He is definitely becoming part of it. And yeah, it sucks. At this lunar lander, I have to admit, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It blew my mind and it got me so angry. 2/3 of this thing not being reusable. That's ridiculous. The Blue Origin part of it being expendable, ridiculous. From the company that makes reusable things. Okay, I'm getting off topic here. But another space nut says, I'd rather it be like Mad Max, where we can all fight about gasoline. Yeah, gasoline, however you folks put it. All right, so yeah. Well, I wouldn't be a huge fan, I have to say. But yeah, whatever happened to the New Shepard launch? They're silent on that, says Ryan. Well, they actually have done a little bit on the New Shepard. I think they actually did launch it. Excuse me, it just didn't make the press very much because it's a suborbital ship and it didn't have any people on it. Okay, let's see. Okay, so to clarify, you believe Mars, you will need to at least be XX old to ride as opposed to no older than XX old, etc. So once again, we're talking about age, that sort of thing. Reusable equals better future, low cost to orbit, more chance of survival. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why I make videos about why the Starship needs to be used for things that are about reusability, missions that focus on its reusability, because that's what makes it so damn good. I'm really excited about that. It got scrubbed, says Ryan. The New Shepard launch got scrubbed. Wow. Okay, so we're 3 minutes away, and Framrick says, thank you. Thanks for the great stream. Well, thank you. Thank you. But we still have some time. Once again, I'm going to point this out. We have so many people watching. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to be part of this, it's in the description as to how to do it. It only costs $3 a month. So please buy if you can, if you're willing to, support this channel. It's real cheap to do it. And I would very much love to have you part of this discussion. It's all in the description on how to do it. So I'm not going to talk anymore. That's my last plug. In Australia, we say petrol. Yes, that's true. You do, don't you, Peroxix? And I mean, that's what they say in Britain too. And yet, at the same time, in the Mad Max movies, they say it's something different. Maybe that's why
Maybe because they were making Mad Max for an American audience. That would be my guess. So thank you, Framrick. Framrick once again saying that he just encouraging folks to support an excellent YouTuber doing the right thing for space. Thank you, Framrick. I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Base on the moon helps us to survive longer. A bit more difficult to attack. It is a bit more difficult, but still well within the range of our current capabilities. It'd be pretty easy to put a nuclear bomb inside a heavy lift rocket and send it to the moon. The Chinese currently have that capability. Wouldn't be very difficult at all. So the moon is just not far enough away. I think that we should have a moon base to facilitate our expansion. I think that that's very important. But at the same time, okay, we are nearly out of time. Ricker is typing here. Hello, Ricker. And Framrick. So these are our last two comments that are coming in. Well, that's just a thanks. So, okay. If anybody else has any other comments to make, feel free to make them now because I am just about to wrap things up. Once again, my pleasure to do this live stream, and thanks so much for all of you guys to be tuning in. Is the weaponization of space inevitable as we expand into space? Framrick, I sure as hell hope not. I hope not, but it certainly looks that way. We're already talking about it. The Space Force certainly seems to be an indication that weaponizing space is what we're trying to do. Thank you. I got to pack my bags for Boca Chica. Well, I got to pack my bags for Huntsville first because it looks like they might be closing the Space Center there by the end of October. So I'm on my way to Huntsville sometime soon to do a tour of that and to do an episode based on Huntsville and I just put a post on this on Twitter, but it looks like Huntsville might close down because of all of this. All right, so we are now out of time. So until we discover whether or not our species is going to be making it for the long term, and by the way, we shouldn't sit around and wait for it to happen. We've got to be taking very decisive action, not just on getting to Mars, but also on making sure to preserve our species. Because if we have to survive on Mars because we've destroyed the Earth, that's going to be a cataclysm that will last for thousands, if not millions of years in our collective consciousness as to how destructive and stupid the human race was. It's something that just gets me angry on a regular basis. I hope to God it doesn't happen, but if it does, we need to be ready for it. So until that moment comes, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.